Welcome back to Amplify Your Garden. Today we are with Luke Baker, Joe and Diane Jenkins, and Aaron Boldrey again for the second episode of myth busting. So be sure to tune in and maybe jot some notes down. And Luke, I'll turn it over to you to kick us off.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Heather. So yeah, one of the myths that I see people oftentimes in gardens is we have to fertilize. So some is good, but more is better. So what I often see is we apply things like compost to a garden and we get a good response from that. And so next year, I said, well, let's apply more compost. And you see, still a good response from that. And then, well, we should apply more compost. And then we see the response starts to dwindle. And then, in fact, what often happens is it goes the opposite direction. We get more phone calls here at the laboratory about my garden is struggling, and people take a soil test, and we look at their soil test. And Joe, you were a few weeks ago telling me about a situation, a story where you did a soil test for grower's garden. What did you? Tell us that story because I find that story fascinating.
Uh, well, when we were working in Mississippi, the Mennonites down there were bad about they would fertilize their garden by putting manure on there. They kept putting manure, manure, and manure, and manure, more manure, and the gardens wouldn't do right, and they all wanted us to take a sample of their garden, and that was something that we just seemed like we took every one of them. But anyway, and some of them that just wouldn't grow, uh, I take it, and everything was so high, it was just devastating to the garden itself. And so I tell them the soil report said, move your garden.
And that's what
And
and that's the same thing I see here on a lot of soil reports that I see for gardeners. It's they've over fertilized or they've over applied something because they thought it was a good thing, and the best thing for them to do is move your garden.
yeah, and but anyway, and some of them did. And of course, it was a project to kind of get it back going. And in that area there, the magnesium typically is pretty low, and so if you lime, pretty much would use dolomitic lime because that we had to make a change there. Where up here, typically we don't use that very often, just occasionally. But that's what can be take place if you over fertilize. You and do you have to have everything perfect to grow a garden? No, but the better it is, the better the garden does. So there, you reach a point where you don't want to go further, and when you fertilize gardens, so many people have such small gardens. Everything is done on like a golf course, green. We do things on per square foot, and so what may take 200 or 300 pounds in a garden may only take a cup or two.
Mhm.
So people say, "Well, that's not enough," but it is. It'll do what you want.
Yeah.
He's
So you,
living proof.
what was that, Diane?
He is living proof that too much sometimes is not better.
You've been called out. Listen, I think we've all made that mistake in beginning in gardening. I can remember as a kid wanting to do that and wanting to go out to the garden and well, I got a response. I saw something good happen and well, next year let's do more or let's do more. And you're right. Sometimes what calls you think in a farm field you're using, hundreds of pounds on an acre basis, but on a garden sometimes you only have a few square feet and like we have some fertilization we're going to do here later this week, we're only going to use like this little itty bitty cup to sprinkle around the tomatoes to give it a little calcium and sulfur for gypsum. So it's like you don't want to. I could go buy a 50-pound bag and I can put across all those tomatoes, but I don't need that much. I just need a little bit. And I think that's the problem. People are like, well, what do I do with the leftover? Well, guess what? Save it till next year or help your neighbors out.
Well, of course, we just I take an ice cream bucket, just go up to the fertilizer plant, tell them I need a little of this, and a little of that.
And they a lot of times will just give it to you, you know.
Well, that's all they ever do. They always, of course, I'm, it's a little different situation with me than what it would be with everybody else, or a lot of other people in the uh, local people or whatever. But I just go up there and tell them what I want, and I'll get a little of this and a little of that. I'll take a couple of buckets. I get kind of what I want, and then I go kind of sprinkle it out.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because here at the lab, people send stuff in and like when we're done with it, it just goes to the dumpster. So there I'm downstairs rooting around and whatever's been sent to the lab, and a lot of times I'll use that to fertilize things. So yeah, different scenarios, but a lot of things you can just go to your local hardware or go to Lowe's or you can order stuff online as well. So Aaron, I'm gonna hit you up here because you're always like, Luke, you need to talk about human health. So let's talk about well, human health and the importance of having balanced nutrition in the soil to have, balanced nutrition for your garden, and then would you eat that?
Very simple concept. You are what you eat, right? You are what you ate as well. And it all starts in the soil. That's why we like soil balance. If your soil's balanced, your plants are going to be balanced, and now you're going to be balanced.
It's a
So,
very simple concept, right?
yeah, it's a pretty good concept. A plant can only hold 100% of something. So, if you have too much of one thing, you're going to be deficient in something else.
And the thing that people forget about in that 100% of something, you know what that is? 75% of it a lot of times is water.
The big three is often overlooked, which is air, water, sunlight. So there's some points where you think it's, oh, my garden didn't do well. I must need to put out more fertilizer. And the big three is the most obvious answer, more than likely, and it's probably the most overlooked as well. You want your soil to be like a great soil scientist told me this one time, like a heartbeat: dry, wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, and then the soil is going to naturally mineralize nutrients from that point. But if your soil is gets wet, it turns into browning batter. Well, that's a physical problem, not a nutrient problem.
Well, I tell you, and our garden out here, that's a problem that we have this year is because it's a first time garden and we're dealing with the past construction soil that we've been left. Our soil is not really great to work with, is it, Heather?
No, it's hard and it's tough, but it works. It's far from perfect, but we've proven that you don't need perfect to have success.
Yeah, and what's interesting, so we talk about this whole concept of some is good, more is better. So, I soil tested this last fall, and it's not, the soil test is not a terrible for this garden, or either we have two gardens actually out here. So I split the one because it's big enough into a north and south, and then I did another one. And you just look at the numbers and they're not terrible. Do I want it the pH as high as it is? No, but I'm not gonna do anything to mess with it. We got decent organic matter levels. Sulfur's low. I did a gypsum application last fall because I knew I was dealing with a tough soil. On the one side of the garden, we have a low phosphorus, and again, that's because that's more subsoil. This side of the garden was more topsoil that was left over from the construction project here. We got plenty of magnesium in our soils, and that's part of the reason why the soils are so hard and tough to deal with is because we got so much magnesium. We like to see percentage wise, we like to see that probably what 12%, 15% maybe at the most in these soils. 12% is probably plenty of magnesium in these soils, but
Mine run 12 to 15%.
yeah, I mean, our soils are so heavy and the cup is so big of how much they can hold because you look at your exchange capacities, like, they're around 16, 17. I think the other sample was 19. So we've got a pretty big container to hold nutrients. So you look at this and it's like you look at the soil report and it's like, well, it's not terrible, or maybe a little low on potash. We maybe like to be that a little bit higher, especially with garden crops, which I got a potash application we're ready to go out with, but everything else looks pretty good. I'd like to see my manganese levels. Luckily, in the laboratory, this is the funny thing, Joe, you were talking about having access to certain things. I found a potassium magnesium sulfate fertilizer that somebody sent in. So I've got an application ready to go out here before the weekend of that. But other than that, I'm not overly disappointed with what I'm seeing here. And so if you're a beginner, you may go out and you plant into this and you see, some yellowing or the plants aren't growing. And it goes back to exactly what Aaron said. Your chemistry is not terrible, but your soil condition is what's holding you back. And it's because soil, air, and sunlight. And right now we've been so cloudy, we're not getting a ton of sunlight. Our garden actually looks pretty good, but it's the fact that it was an old construction site because, well, I shouldn't say old construction site. This is a new building, but it was a construction site not that many years ago and has been run over. You just struggle with compaction. And that's really what holds us back. And so to help alleviate that, when we planted most things, we actually mixed in a little peat moss. And that peat moss we mixed in with that sticky clay and everything, and it's helped give us some aeration to that soil so it doesn't stay just so wet, and when it dries out, it doesn't stay as hard. So that's something that we did to alleviate that. Now, are we going to do that next year? No, that's not my plan. We actually have a cover crop of buckwheat and some sort of type of bean that's going to go out here pretty soon. So we're going to try to use plants to help alleviate that for next year. But Aaron, to your point, water, air, and sunlight come probably before nutrition.
For sure. If you're limited in any one of those things, it really doesn't matter how your nutrition is. And you're 100% right. You know how many gardens are in the backyards, which might have been where the basement was dug out and they spread all the soil out to make a nice yard, a level yard. Or like in your case, there were cranes out there and
Yeah.
bulldozers. And that's
And to Joe's point, what he mentioned earlier, so Joe, what's the first thing that you would do if you saw you knew this was happening? Our organic matter is not low, and we have this hard soil, and you get on to your Mennonite guys, and what are they going to do? What's the first thing they're going to do?
Well, with that right there, like yours, uh, I right there, potash is your best friend.
Yep.
Uh, I like 3 to 5 on potash, and my potash in my garden is around 6, and it really does well.
Yep.
But your magnesium's a little high. What can you do about that? Well, you can put some gypsum on there, but your things don't have to be perfect to do a good garden. It, it so much of the weather, the water, the air, everything makes a difference. And you can raise a garden, and it's not just the soil's not perfect. The pH may not be 7; it may be 6.1 or 6.2, and you still can raise it. You can raise a good garden. It's just so much has got to do with the weather and how you get out there and work with it, whether you leave it or whether you tend to it.
Yep. Yep. Weed pressure. If it's too wet when you're in there, causing more compaction. Um, one of the points that I would want to make though is if you're a novice and you're just entering this, the first thing that I see people do is apply manure or compost. And they do see a response to that. Just like applied peat moss out here, we're seeing a response to that. But if I apply peat moss every year, I'm actually going to cause problems because I'm going to turn my garden into a peat bog practically because I'm doing it. And so what I see is something like, let me stop this share. I've got another soil report I would like to share. Um, and again, it's people just don't understand the importance of some is
Yeah,
good,
that's exactly what I was about to say, Luke.
but
I almost never consider phosphorus in a garden sample.
yeah.
You raise a garden a couple years in a row, you're going to have, like you have here, 1,000 pounds of phosphorus out there.
And really in my last reports that I had up, that was plenty of phosphorus. I was at
Yeah.
200 pounds, 250 pounds of P2O5. That was plenty of phosphorus um, for what we're trying to do. But yet this is what I see. And this is the stuff that causes imbalances. Because you think about the amount of, or the elements that phosphorus reacts with in soil. It reacts with zinc, it reacts with calcium, it reacts with the
When you say react, you're meaning tie up.
high up, right? And so therefore it's not as easily available to the plant. And then if you get too much phosphorus in the plant, that phosphorus within the plant can tie up those elements as well. So this is again, this is typically what I see is, well, we got a response the first year because our garden was crappy. And so we're going to do it every year. And next thing you know, you got 13% organic matter, you got 250 ppm of phosphorus. Um, your potash numbers, like Joe, you said you wanted 3 to 5%. Manure a lot of times doesn't have a lot of potash in it, but it has a lot of nitrogen and a lot of phosphorus. And you know what I heard about this garden? So this is a friend of ours. What, what do you think I heard about this garden, about the plants? What do you see when you see gardens like this, Joe, with soil test results or Diane?
Well, one thing, your phosphate's so high. Of course, I have that same problem. See, mine is 1,000. Uh, but I don't know. I live with that. I don't ever put any phosphate on mine. And eventually, if I live long enough, maybe it'll go down some.
It should
But
eventually. Eventually. This is what I heard from this client. We get beautiful plants. Our plants are growing. We get nothing on it.
Mhm.
We don't have anything to harvest. There's no tomatoes, there's no peppers, and I looked at them and I said, well, your organic matter is 13%. I said, you're probably applying nitrogen like crazy. I said, you're going to grow big, beautiful plants, but when it comes time to make fruit, I said, your potash numbers are low. I said, you got good boron, but I said, you're pushing the plant too much. The plant is using all the nutrients that it's taking up to grow green foliage and not growing fruit. And I said, unfortunately, you've put so much on here, you can't control the nitrogen being released from your organic matter. And I said, I bet you're applying nitrogen too. He's like, yeah. And I'm like, you're applying too much nitrogen.
Luke, when I see reports like this and I get calls like that as well, one thing I like to point out is basically what these guys are when your report looks like this, you're basically feeding your plants ice cream. All they're doing is getting big and fat, and there's no fruits and vegetables to help them actually be healthy instead of fruit. Um, so again, to your point, as the whole point of this, this episode is if some is good, more is better. That's not the case. Ice cream is great, but let's not have it for every meal.
yes,
I'd,
yeah.
I'd be 500 pounds if I had ice cream every day. The other thing that he commented too to me was when he goes, our tomatoes, he's like, we get these beautiful plants, and what fruit we do get, we get like this. something on the bottom of the fruit. I was like, it's because you got too much nitrogen. I said you're over fertilizing your tomatoes. You're growing too much plant, and the calcium that is being taken up. That's I said you have blossom end rot. The calcium that is being taken up is going into those cells to keep growing the plant when you're trying to make fruit. And I said that you've got this battle going on. And I said what suffers is your fruit. I said stop applying nitrogen. I said how much are you irrigating? Well, I said we're watering a lot. So we tested his water too, and he had high bicarbonate in his water as well. And then that bicarbonate gets in the soil and it ties up his calcium in the soil. So he's really fighting it. Again, it's not perfect. I give him some gypsum to try to help with this calcium situation as the plant's growing. And I told him don't apply any nitrogen this year and see if we can't get more fruit. And I gave him some potash too, Joe.
Yeah. Well, I have a problem with, even though my pH is good, with my first tomatoes, I have problems with blossom end rot. And that could be part of this with a little bit out of balance. Uh, could have that effect on it. And I, as time moves on, I don't have that problem. But it seems like right off the first tomatoes that I put on, I have a problem with. And I don't know, Aaron, you may can have some thought on that. But
This it's called cat face,
yeah, and
which normally you normally want your tomatoes to kind of look like that on the bottom. Then you get them and they look like that,
yeah,
and that's called cat facing, and that's what this garden probably has as well. And it's too much nitrogen, too much nitrates,
yeah.
and it's usually
Well,
always you're almost always going to see it on your first set, like your first tomato, the cat face. And it's because of how it's concentrated in the plant. You usually have a small plant, a lot of nitrates. It's not until you get more vegetative growth and that nitrate can spread out in the plant is when that goes away. So soil test
now
like that, you can be cat faced and out
I don't
entire
have
thing.
much cat face problems, but I do have with my first tomatoes. Sometimes I have a little blossom in it,
You
and
know,
then once
but I think
the
that's
first
probably
ones come
from.
off, I don't have that anymore.
I think that's probably from. So we're putting on tomatoes right now. Heather just said she saw our first one out there, and our plants are only, what are they, Heather? 2 feet tall.
Yeah,
They're not out of their
24, 30 inches. They're not hatefully big.
not out of their cages yet. But the plants, from when I left on Friday and I got back on Tuesday, it probably grew a foot over the weekend. My guess, what is happening on those first tomatoes, you're still getting so much growth yet that you're trying to fill the cells of that new growth with calcium because that's where the calcium goes. But you also have now these little fruits coming on that are competing. It'd probably almost be better to remove those little fruits or those first blossoms to kind of just abort those and let that plant finish growing. And then that way, when the plant stops, I think that's probably why in the later tomatoes you don't see it because the plant's slowing its growth, and therefore you probably have enough calcium then to distribute to the fruit that is putting on. But we're going to go out and do a gypsum application. We know we have a few little fruits on. We're gonna get a rain today, pretty heavy rain. We're going to do a gypsum application at the base of those plants. I've done that before in the past and have not had a single issue with blossom end rot as long as I do it right at the beginning of fruit set. But again,
Well,
I think you're right. It's nitrogen. And nitrogen is the biggest issue probably in gardens that I see.
well, I have I have strung my tomatoes 5 times. I've decided I'm not going to string them again. I'm going to let them grow out over the strings.
They're
And
shoulder high to me.
Oh my goodness.
so, anyway, we're going to stop there with that. And, uh, they putting on lots of tomatoes, and I've got. Matter of fact, last night I had fried green tomatoes for supper, and fried squash along with crappie and coleslaw made from the cabbage, and so we pretty much ate out of the garden last night outside the fish. And
You are what
we
you eat.
we we're giving squash away, we're giving zucchini away. My second crop onions are coming on pretty good. I don't know how they're gonna do as the summer goes. My second crop radishes are putting on real good. We're pulling radishes out of them. The bell peppers, we've put up most of the bell pepper. Got a little bit left maybe, and the eggplant is blooming good, so it's getting ready to start. The okra's getting ready to start, and things are coming along. It's just some of it's better than others, and that's something that'll happen in your gardens. Sometimes some years some things are going to do better than other things do.
Yep. Yep. So going back, and that's and again a lot of that has to do with air, water, and light, like Aaron mentioned before, and then just the temperature outside too. I know, like I said, our radishes, we had the best radish crop I think I've ever raised before in this garden out here, and I said we're dealing with the crappiest soils, but I think it's because we had cool temperatures. That's
Mhm.
radishes don't like heat, and we had cool temperatures. So again, water, air, and light are big contributors to the success of your garden. And even in the soil, those things in the soil as well too contribute to the success of the garden. But going back to the soil test, how often do you soil test your garden?
About every other year, I do mine. And sometimes not as often as that.
Yeah. Aaron, how like so I don't know if you have a garden, but I know you work with a lot of growers and stuff. How often do you test?
Every year, the first year, again, like if it's a raised bed, there's almost not a real big need to soil test it at all because you're creating your own soil, and there's gonna be a lot of breakdown, especially if you're adding like peat,
Mm,
other other organic matter to that soil to create your own soil. So whatever you tested on that first year, it's gonna be absolutely different the second year. So that to me, that's the most important sample is year two of your garden.
yeah. And I said we're going to actually do ours, I think, every year too. And again, the reason being is that I want to get a pulse on what we're doing. I don't want to get to the point where I'm having to battle. We put too much nitrogen on, or we got organic matter levels so high that the soil is just naturally, the bacteria in the soil are breaking down that organic matter, naturally releasing nitrogen into the soil uncontrollably. I want to get it to the point where I said, like you mentioned, Aaron, I want the soil to be healthy, so the plants will be healthy, and then I want the plants to be able to feed the people here at Brookside. And again, so healthy soil, healthy plants, healthy humans. So yeah, we're gonna test every year. We're getting ready to pull a water test here pretty soon as well because we know we're going to be fighting bicarbonates in our water, which is going to tie up some of our nutrients in the soil. So we're getting ready to do that as well because we're about ready to turn the water on here in a few weeks. So. Now, a water test will only do that one time because our water shouldn't change. We're on city water here, so we really shouldn't change. And most wells don't change that much over time either. But Joe, Diane, do you guys test your water? Have you tested your water there?
No, not lately. It's been a long time.
But you
But
probably not different.
we on a community water system,
Okay.
and so but we checked it one time, and outside of that, we at one time took water samples to the iceberg to the lab down there, to the city lab, and they checked our water, uh, and we did it one time with Brookside because we wanted to see what it would say, and that's really all. And it all has always shown really good water.
Yeah.
Uh, so we don't check it
Yeah,
anymore.
usually one time, and you're just kind of getting a pulse on what you got. I said the two things that I'm looking for are sodium and bicarbonate. And one of the things I remember living at home with my mom and dad, we had well water, and one of the things that we always had to remember is do not water from the house, water from the barn, and that's because we had a water softener in the house. And if you water from the house, you were dumping not only some of the bicarbonate out, but you were dumping sodium on that garden as well too. And basically, sodium bicarbonate is like French fry salt, and it gets hot in the summertime. It's like you can't water it enough. So we water from the barn, but again, you don't have the sodium, but you still got the bicarbonate, which again ties up your calcium when it gets into the soil. And we tended to have a lot of blossom end rot. I didn't know that as a kid growing up. I know that now. So I'm always very cautious about what water we're using it up until this point, being that we're here at the laboratory. These plants out in our garden have only seen rain and deionized water. So they've not seen any hard water or any kind of city water to this point. So we've been very fortunate. And that's probably why they look so good.
Luke, I'm glad you brought that up because I started seeds at home and I was just watering them out of the faucet in the house. And those little peat pellets that I had them in, you could actually see salt pushed to the top. So there was a layer of salt on the top of the soil, um, just because of we have such hard water, so we soften it a lot, and then all that salt rose to the top, and you could see the salt just sitting on top of the soil.
That I think if you that with hard water where you soften it, I think you're gonna see that,
Hmm.
Yep. And it's
especially if you have to do a good bit.
Yeah, and it's something you got to be careful of, like when you're watering, like you think you're watering and you're doing a good thing and you are, but if you're getting too much salt out there, if you're not combating that bad salt that you're putting on with something like gypsum or counteracting that, you could have issues in your garden as well. So
Uh,
just another thing that you have to be cautious of.
let's go back a minute to the soil reports because since we talked, I've got two here. I sampled my garden on 10/3/23 and then again on 2/10/25. And in 23, I had a 7.1 pH. In 25, I had a 7. In organic matter, I had a 2.42, 2.42 in 23, and this year 2.89. Estimated nitrogen release uh, in 23 was 68, 25, 78. Sulfur 22 and 23, 15 in 25. 1108 phosphate and 1095. So I went down just a little bit, and I'm wanting that to continue going down. Uh, Calcium was 4582, 4632 this year. Magnesium 502, this year 528. Uh, Potassium 746 and 722 this year. I like those numbers because my exchange capacity, let me back up, was 15 both years
Yeah,
with
and
them.
so for our viewers, the exchange capacity is how many nutrients, how big the cup is to hold the nutrients in the soil. So the larger that number, the more the soil can hold. And so 15 is just a good average number. We can see those in the sands. You could get down 2, 3. And so you have very little room to hold nutrients in those soils, or you can see heavy clays and you get up into the 30s and stuff with exchange capacity and then you can hold a lot of nutrients for that soil. So it's you gotta recognize how big is your cup that you can hold those nutrients in.
Yep.
No, those are really good numbers. I wish we had 700 pounds of potash.
Well, that's just taken over time. I've just done that. My sodium was 60, and this year's 48. Uh, Percentage wise of the base saturation, 74, 92, and 23, 74, 76 this year. Magnesium 1368, and this year is 1420. Uh, Potassium 6.26, and this year was 5.98. So basically the same. Sodium 85, and this year was 67. Uh, other bases 4.3, and then this year 4.4. Uh, so everything is the boron. That's something that seems in my area that you always got to add a little boron. That's a key right there. Also, you just because mine is 0.62 and 0.62 both years, and so I like one at least, and so that's something we just add a little boron to it.
Yeah. And the point of boron where it's real critical is that flowering on a lot of crops. And so you have to have enough boron. The one caution is when you say add a little boron, you really mean add a little boron because you add too much boron and you will fry your garden. I mean, you're talking like, you know, very small amounts. And if you're unsure, you should really ask to how much boron can I apply? Because even on an ag field, what are you applying? Like a pound per acre? Like it's like very small amounts. And on a garden, you're dealing with, an acre is 43,560 square feet. Your garden might only be, 100 square feet, 200 square feet. And so you do not want to add a pound or a half a pound of boron to 100 square feet. You're going to have all kinds of problems. So make sure that if you're going to mess with the minor elements that you maybe ask before you do so, or you're really going to have problems.
Yeah, you could be talking about ounces.
Yeah,
Hmm.
people use wood ash. Our old CEO, Mark Flock, who was my predecessor, he told me a story one time. He's like, "Oh, I got these wood ashes. I'm going to fertilize with it. A lot of potash." He couldn't grow anything in that flower bed for like 4 years because the boron got to be 40 part per million. It fried everything that he tried to plant. And because wood ash are high in boron, while high in potassium, it's also high in boron too. So you got to be really careful, like with those minor elements, how much you put out.
Yeah,
So again, some is good, more is not better in most cases. But all right, well, let's wrap up. I think we've had a good session. Again, I think we'll probably raise some more questions. One thing I do want to talk about, the some is good, more is better. When you're watering your garden, do you guys ever see your tomatoes split? Like they just like they almost like grow like too
yeah,
fast, they split, and then they just start leaking and
yes.
yeah. So do you know what that's from?
Well, watering and that I guess, increases the uptake of nitrogen at the same time, and that may be causing your tomatoes to split
Yeah. So
and crack.
part of that, so letting your garden get too dry. So again, some dryness is good. Aaron said you want those wet, dry cycles. Letting it too dry and then overwatering it when those tomatoes are trying to fill, all of a sudden you get a lot of water coming into the plant, and then it causes that tomato to like grow too fast and you don't have enough of the elements now to help that tomato, to finish that tomato out. So you'll get the splitting in those tomatoes. So if you're watering your garden, if you can control water, um, some is good, more is not better. So keep water consistent if you can over your growing season as well.
You see that if you water in the evening and you forget it and it runs all night.
Yeah, that's not probably a good thing. If you're bone dry and you do that,
That's right.
that's where too much dryness is not a good thing and too much wetness is not a good thing.
Oh,
Oh,
I
that's
have done
hilarious. Well, anything else, Heather, Aaron, Joe, Diane, anything else to add?
Mhm.
Nope, that was a good. This is a good one. Good myth.
Yeah. So again, some is good, more is not better, is what we're finding out. And so it's really important that you're taking soil tests and keeping a pulse on your garden. And if you're starting from, in really bad soil like we are this year, we do need to do some things, but we're going to test again this fall and we're going to be cautious moving forward so we don't end up with problems because we do want good production from our gardens so that we can provide for the employees here at the lab. So with that, I want to thank all of our participants today. It's been another good session. We appreciate all the wisdom that everybody has and is willing to share. If you have questions, reach out to us on our website at www.blink.com. We're more than happy to help answer any questions or direct you to any of these people who could help answer your questions as well. So, all right, everybody. Well, thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
See you next
See ya.
time.
it.
Be sure to like and comment on this post, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook.